Hello and welcome to the beginner's guide on how to ride a dirt bike with a clutch. This video is for any of you who have just purchased a brand new bike or new to you dirt bike. I'm going to walk you through the very basics. If you've never ridden a dirt bike before, this video is going to be for you. How it's going to work is we're going to go through the basic parts and pieces of the dirt bike, the controls, how they operate, and how they all work together. After we do that, I'm going to give you a step-by-step tutorial on how to ride this dirt bike safely and effectively. After you've watched this video and you've gone through the steps that I'm going to lay out for you, you should be able to hop on your new dirt bike and feel comfortable turning it on, riding it in an open area that's safe, and we'll maybe do some shifting and start to learn turns as well. The idea of this video is to be a guide for you, so you can go back and refer to each step along the way. If you're having trouble with, let's say, the clutch, you can go back to that part and rewatch over and over again. With all that being said, if you do enjoy this video, please leave it a like, drop a comment below, and let me know if you have any questions. I'd be happy to answer them. I really enjoy helping people get started and learn how to ride dirt bikes. So drop those comments below if you have any questions about it. And feel free to subscribe, because I'm going to be posting more tips and tricks videos for beginners to help you have the most fun on your bike that you possibly can. This video is going to be broken up into chapters, so if you want to go back and replay something, you can look in the description and you'll see timestamps for what we're talking about in each section. Alright, I'm going to explain to you basically what each control and part and piece of your dirt bike is going to look like. I have with me a 2024 CRF250F. Now this is a great bike for a beginner. If you don't have a bike that's similar to this one, don't worry, I'm going to cover some of the differences you might find, but we're going to be using this bike as it's a good bike for beginners to learn on. We're just going to start with the controls up here. This bike has a key. Not all bikes are going to have a key, but in this case, you're going to need to turn the key on to start the bike. A couple other controls up here. We have the electric start. Your bike may also have a kickstarter, and it will be most likely on the right side. You just pull that kickstarter out and push it down with your foot to start the bike. In this case, it's really easy. We have an electric start. Moving over to the left side here, we have the kill switch. So this will kill the power to the engine and shut it off. Those are the basic controls on how to start and stop the engine. On the left side of the handlebar, we have the clutch. This is what you're going to use to control your takeoff and your stop, and also to shift between the gears. On the right side over here, we have the front brake, and we also have the throttle. And on dirt bikes, they're going to be a twist throttle. So you can see this twists. Alright, those are the controls on the handlebars. Right here we have the gas cap. You unscrew this, that's where you put the gas in. On this bike it has a fuel light, it'll tell you when the fuel gets low. Most dirt bikes don't have that. Moving down, on the left side of the bike, we have the foot peg. This is what you stand on. The kickstand, as you can see here. This is the gear shift. This is going to be used in combination with the clutch. So you pull the clutch in and you'll operate this gear shift to select your gears. We'll talk more about that later when we get into the actual riding portion. On the other side, we're going to have the other foot peg, which is what you stand on once again, and the rear brake. This controls the rear brake. This controls the front brake. So we do have two different levers that operate independently, the front and the rear brake. It's not just you press one and they both lock up. So you do have a little bit of different controls as far as braking goes, but we're going to talk about that further in the video. This bike is what we call fuel injected. It means it does not have a carburetor. Now you don't have to understand that in order to learn how to ride a dirt bike. However, I just want to touch on this because your bike may be an older bike that doesn't have fuel injection. You may have a carbureted bike. In that case, you'll have what's called a choke. Sometimes when the bike is cold, you'll need to pull that choke in order to start it. The choke is usually found somewhere in here. It'll be a little black knob. You'll pull it, or it can be found up here on some trail bikes as well. Now, like I said, sometimes if the weather's cold or the bike's having trouble starting, you might need to pull that choke. Also, near the carburetor somewhere, you may have an on-off fuel petcock. You'll need to switch that in the on position in order for the bike to be able to deliver fuel from the fuel tank into the engine. If you turn that off and you try to start the bike and ride, it will just go bog down and it will shut off, or you might not even be able to start it. So remember, if your bike is carbureted, you may need the choke. You need to make sure you have your fuel on and you need to make sure you have the key on if you have a key. Some other basic parts before we get into this. As you can see on the front of the bike, you have your front wheel right here, and this is your brake disc. Now you may have drum brakes. They look a little bit different, but they perform the same basic function. On this bike, it has rear brake discs as well. Like I said, you might have drum brakes, but basically the rear brake is somewhere in this wheel setup. On the left side of the bike, your chain, your drive chain, which delivers power from the engine back to the rear wheel. This is called your rear sprocket. The power gets delivered from the engine and it turns the rear sprocket. When you give the bike gas, it will deliver power and it will spin this rear wheel. Your front wheel does not actually have any power delivered to it. It's solely delivered to the rear wheel. I know this is very basic, but I just want to give everyone an understanding of how the motorcycle works. It's important as you move into more advanced riding to understand where the power is delivered from, because it'll help you control slides, sort of understand where the traction's coming from. That's pretty much all the basic parts of the bike. Now let's move into getting on the bike, and we're gonna take our first little ride, and we're only gonna ride it about a couple feet here. Make sure you have all the proper gear on. Main things you're gonna wanna need, I recommend definitely wear a helmet, 100%. Always wear a helmet. Boots are a good idea. If you don't have motocross specific boots, make sure you have something that gives you a little bit of ankle support. You definitely want it closed-toed, and you want that toe to be kind of hard because you might kick something like a rock or whatever. If you can get ankle support on the boot, that's great. Something like hiking boots work well, work boots, that sort of thing. Those are the main things that you 100% need to be wearing, along with some sort of long pant. And it's recommended a long sleeve shirt as well, because you don't want to get your knees and arms scuffed up. Like I said, I'm not going to go super specific on gear. Those are the bare minimum that you need to learn how to ride your dirt bike. If you're interested in a video on gear, let me know. I'll make one in the future. So now that you've made sure you got your safety gear on and you find a nice big open area, you don't really want any obstacles, anything to hit. So as you can see, I have a huge field here, nothing to hit for miles. That is going to be the perfect place, preferably something flat too. You see there's hills over there, you want to start on a flat area. Find your location, you got all your safety gear on, it's time to hop on the bike. So we're going to lift the bike up and we're going to put up the kickstand. Now normally you can get on the bike either side, but most people tend to get on the bike from the left side. So swing your right leg up over the bike. And if you have trouble touching the ground, luckily this is a low bike, but if you have trouble touching the ground, you can go on your tiptoes and you can kind of balance between tiptoes. Another thing you can do is you can kind of hang your butt off to one side. Make sure you have your weight on one leg, and then you can kind of rest your leg like this on over the seat and onto the foot peg. Now hopefully you have a bike that's somewhat set up for your height. It will make things a lot easier, but there are ways to get around it if you're a shorter rider. Now we're sitting on the bike. We have the controls in front of us. We'll make sure the key is on, and what I'm going to do now is the bike is in neutral, so I can just simply press the electric start. Now if you have a Kickstarter, go ahead and start your bike by kicking the Kickstarter. Make sure the bike is in neutral, which I'll show you how to find right now. What you're going to do, pull the clutch in and press the gear shift down until you feel, and you may have to rock it back and forth until you feel that stop. You don't have to press really aggressively, you can press nice and easy. And then you're going to go a small little minute click up. If you let the clutch out, you should be able to roll the bike back and forth without any resistance. If it is in gear, you'll notice, let me put it in first gear for you. So there's that click. I'm going to let the clutch out and I'm going to try to roll the bike forward. Oh, it locked up. Roll it back. See, it's locking up. That means it's in gear. So half click up, find neutral, we're good to go. Now we're going to start the bike. This one's real easy. Got the easy button. Press that in. Bike is running. Okay, since we're in neutral, the bike's running, but we're not going anywhere. We can hit the throttle. It will rev the bike up, but it will not actually deliver power to the rear wheel. How do we start going in that case then? If we can sit here and rev this bike all day, but it's not going anywhere, how are we going to get going? Okay, that is where the transmission comes in. So, just like when we were finding neutral, we're going to pull the clutch in, and we're going to press it down. That's usually going to take you down into first gear. Most bikes, the pattern is one click down is first, and then up, 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 as many gears as you have. In this case, it's 4 up. I have 5 gears total, so 1 down, 4 up. For the first time, we're going to shift down into first. Keep that clutch held in. If we let the clutch out, the bike will start to move forward, okay? So we're not going to do that until we want to. Now, remember where your brakes are. We have the front brake here, and we have the rear brake here. Anytime we want to stop, we're going to pull the clutch in, disengage power to the rear wheel, and slowly put pressure on both brakes. Let off the throttle as well. Now it's time to start learning where our friction zone is on the clutch. Now, what is the friction zone? The friction zone is the point at which the clutch engages and begins to deliver power to the rear wheel. As you can see earlier, when I let the clutch out, the bike starts to lurch forward. Not all bikes will do this. Some bikes are a little bit finicky and they'll want to stall if you do this without giving it any throttle. But in this case, this bike is really good to learn on. And I can let the clutch out nice and slow, and it will start going forward without stalling. Now, as you can see, pull the clutch in, and I came to a nice stop. So what we're going to do is we're going to learn the friction zone. So what I want you to do is get on your bike, put it into first gear. As you're holding the clutch in, you're going to give it a tiny little bit of throttle, or you may not even need to if you have a bike like this. Try it out. With a tiny little bit of throttle, we're going to slowly let the clutch out, and then we're going to pull it back in once we start to move, okay? Slowly let the clutch out, pull it back in when we start to move. Let the clutch out, pull it back in when we start to move. Let the clutch out, pull it back in when we start to move, okay? What may happen is you might let the clutch out too fast, and it will stall. No big deal. If that happens, let off the gas, take a breather, find neutral, start the bike back. What we're going to try to do is move the bike forward little bit by little bit while still keeping the bike running. We want to try to not let this bike stall. We're not going to try to ride out into the sunset. We're just going to try to lurch forward just that little bit by little bit by little bit while manipulating the clutch. And that's going to practice finding that friction zone, okay? Back into first gear, a little bit of gas, clutch out, clutch in, clutch out, clutch in, a little bit of gas, clutch out, clutch in, okay? And as you can see, I'm pulling the front brake here a little bit to stop, clutch out, clutch in, okay? Boom. Now, once you found the friction zone, now I just put it in neutral, let the clutch out, I'm sitting here chilling. Okay. Once you're comfortable with that friction zone, you understand where that clutch is engaging. Now what we can start to do is we can ride further. So, put it in first gear. I'm going to do the same thing. A little bit of gas. Let the clutch out slowly. As we start going, I'm not going to pull the clutch in. I'm just going to keep riding. And I'm going to give a nice gentle bit of throttle. And I'm going to keep going until I feel like it's time I want to stop. I'm going to pull the clutch in, let off the throttle, and if you're going slow enough, you can just put your feet down, the bike will come to a stop. If not, you can pull the front brake, you can press the rear brake as well. When this clutch is in, there is no power being delivered to the rear wheel. So, if at any point in time you feel like it's getting out of control, let off the throttle, pull the clutch in. You'll be good, trust me. Then, after you've done that, you can start thinking about the brakes. But main thing, if things start to get out of control, let off the throttle, pull the clutch in, okay? Now, we're going to do that again, and we're going to turn. Now, you might have to practice this multiple times, and it's okay if you mess up and if you stall. Just keep at it, and if you have to, you can go back to the first step where we're just working on the friction zone, okay? I'm going to get going, and I'm going to try to do a right turn. So, I have it in first gear. I'm going to give it a little gas, let the clutch out, and I'm going to start going. Once you're comfortable, you're going a little bit of distance, you can start to make your right turn. So, I'm going to turn my handlebars to the right. I'm still sitting straight upright. You don't have to lean at this slow speed. Just turn my handlebars to the right. I made a nice turn. Now I'm heading back this way. All right. I'm going to turn a little bit to the right so we can stay on the flat section. So now I'm headed this direction. I want to turn left. Turn my handlebars to the left. You'll find that this is very similar to riding a bicycle. The only difference is you don't have pedals, you have this throttle. Now, I'm ready to stop. So I'm going to pull the clutch in, let off the gas, pull the brake, put my foot down. And we're at a stop. Shift into neutral. Now that was second gear. Sometimes you'll find the wrong gear. And we can let go of the clutch once we're in neutral. Keep practicing this multiple times until you get very comfortable. You're probably going to end up getting bored. And you're going to notice that first gear in these bikes is very, very slow. So once you've reached a point where you're super comfortable, and you can ride around as much as you want. If you have a nice big open area, do that. Get going. Practice making your turns. Practice stopping. Practice starting. Just ride around in first gear. Once you get bored of first gear and you feel very confident and comfortable, now it's time to learn how to shift. So we're going to do that. And before I turn the bike back on, I'm going to explain to you how this works. So it's very similar to what we did to get into first gear whenever we were stopped, but we're just going to be doing it while we're moving. So there's a little bit of control you have to do with the throttle as well. You want to shift when you're at a high RPM range. So let me first explain what that is. So this is what when the bike starts getting louder and you start to realize that you're not actually getting as more power as you twist the throttle, that's when you want to shift. So at this point, we don't need to shift, but now we could probably shift, okay? Like I can keep twisting the throttle and it's not really going to give me that much more power. Okay. So like I could shift right there. All right. So like I said, when you start to get bored of first gear and you start to realize like, oh, I want to go a little faster, that's the point at which you need to shift. So we're going along. We're in first gear, clutch out, a little bit of throttle. We reach that point where the bike's, you want to go a little faster. And what we're going to do is we're going to pull in the clutch, and at the same time we're going to let off the throttle, and we're going to shift with our foot, click it up into second. And then we're going to let off the clutch, and then we're going to give it more throttle. Once again, we're in first, riding along with a little bit throttle. We're going to pull the clutch in, let off the gas, shift up with our foot, let out the clutch, give it gas again. This all is in one fluid motion. It might take you a little bit of time to kind of get used to the motion, and it might feel a little clunky at first, but over time you will develop that muscle memory. A lot to think about, but what I recommend is just trying to do it on your bike before you start going. You don't actually have to twist the throttle, but you can emulate it. It's easier to do it while we're actually going. So what I'm going to do now is demonstrate as we're moving. Now listen to how the bike sounds as we do this. This will be helpful, and you'll start to understand what's going on in the motorcycle based on the sound of the engine. Okay, I'm going to start going in first gear. Riding along. I feel like I want to shift, so I'm going to let off the throttle, pull in the clutch, shift up, and then let the clutch out and give it throttle again. Okay, now we're in second. Second gear is a little more comfortable at medium speeds. We're going to do exactly what we were doing before. We're just going to turn. Now at these faster speeds you might need to lean a little bit while you're turning. As you can see, I'm leaning. Okay, now if I don't want to go this fast, I can shift back down. So let off the gas, pull the clutch in, shift down, let the clutch out, and give it gas. Now you might notice when you shift down, you get a little bit of what's called engine braking. So I'm going to shift into first and let off, and it feels like, whoa, it lurches me forward. That is called engine braking. That's totally normal. You'll probably notice that a lot as you're first starting, and until your shifts get a little smoother, you might notice that as you're shifting down. Now, once again, I'm going to explain how to shift up. So I'm in second right now. I'm going to shift up into third. Throttle on, and what I'm going to do is just pull the clutch in, shift up, let the clutch back out. And as I pulled the clutch in, I left off the throttle. Okay, I'm going to shift down, same deal. Anytime you want to shift the gear, pull the clutch in. Okay, so I'm going to shift down again, pull the clutch in, shift down. Okay, I shifted back up into second. Here we are. Make a turn. I'm going to shift into third, pull the clutch in, shift, clutch out. Okay, so this is something that it's kind of hard to explain. It's a really good amount of just kind of getting the feel for it, but so you know the basics, that's what you're doing. Once again, you don't have to start trying that until you're comfortable, just riding around in first gear. Now, we've covered the very, very basics on how to ride a dirt bike. I've walked you through what each of the controls are, how to get going, and how to stop. In first gear, I've walked you through the basics of shifting, told you a little bit about good conditions to learn to ride in, and also what safety gear to have. One of the things you may have noticed that I didn't really touch on was the brakes, and that is because when you're first learning with a bike with a clutch, you're going to be doing a lot of this stuff at very slow speeds because there's a lot to think about. There's a lot going on and it's all new to you. You're not used to manipulating these controls in this way, so you're probably going to be doing these at a very slow speeds. You're probably not going to be giving it very much throttle at all, like just breathing on the throttle just a little bit. And you may have noticed whenever I pulled that clutch and I let off the throttle, I kind of just came to a stop naturally. Now, it's always good to practice pulling the brake in, hitting the foot brake, understanding how these feel and how they work. Now what we're going to do is we're going to show you a little bit of emergency braking in case you would get kind of out of hand going a little too fast and you want to stop. Keep in mind that when you're just practicing and you're going nice and slow, you're probably not really going to have to use the brakes all that much. You may pull it in a little bit, press the foot brake a little bit, but I'm going to show you just a little bit of emergency braking technique. I'm going to start the motorcycle, put it into first gear, and we're going to get going. If you remember from earlier in the video, I explained that the front brake and the rear brake operate independently of one another. So you can pull the front brake in and it will only control the front brake. You can hit the foot brake and it will only control the rear brake. Now, when you're first starting, if you want to have the most effective stopping power, you're going to want to hit both these brakes at the same time, but you're going to want to progressively add more and more pressure to both of these brakes. You don't want to just slam the brakes all at once. I'll show you what will happen if you do that. First off, if we just slam the front brake, which is not something you want to do, especially on grass. Now ready? We're going to pull the front brake. First off, the bike stalled because I didn't pull the clutch in, but also you see that skid mark? Now I wasn't going very fast, but what can happen is if you pull the front brake in, your front wheel loses traction, your back wheel's still going, and the bike will want to like wash out from under you and you end up falling. We don't want that to happen. So we're not going to pull the front brake completely in all at once by itself. Similarly, we're not going to do that with the rear brake either. If we start going fast and we just jam on the rear brake, my rear brake locked up. And luckily, like I said, we weren't going fast. But what can happen is your back end can start to fishtail, you lose all control basically, and you go down. So we're not going to pull the front brake in completely on its own. We're not going to hit the rear brake completely on its own. We're going to do nice, gentle, progressive braking, which means start with a little bit of pressure, and as you start to slow down, apply more until you stop. Okay, so we're going to get going pretty fast. And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to pull the clutch in and slowly, I barely even pressed the rear brake. It was mainly the front, but I slowly started here, and as we start to slow down, give it more and more pressure until we come to a stop. Now, I'm going to go really fast, and I'm going to do it. But watch, I never lock this up, and I never lock that up either. I know it's going to be hard to see that, but I never lock up the rear brake either. I'm going to try to go as fast as I can, and then just come to a stop, and we'll see how quick it takes. The key with braking is you want it to be progressive. You don't want to do it all at once. You want to start slow, you want to start with a little pressure and give it more. You see that tree there? That's where I'm going to start applying the brakes, and we'll see how far we go past the tree. Okay. What was that, about 12 feet? As you saw, I never broke traction with the front brake. I did break a little traction with the rear brake, but because I progressively braked with the front, I didn't wipe out, and I also stopped pretty darn quick. So just keep that in mind when you are riding. To be as safe as possible, learn emergency progressive braking techniques. You don't have to try it at full speed like I was doing. You can do it nice and slow. Go a little bit, pull the brake in slowly, and stop. Now, like I said, most of the time I'm going along, pull the clutch in, and eventually, once you let off the throttle, you can kind of coast to a stop. But if you are in a pickle, always remember, don't just lock on the brakes, progressively hit them. Okay, so guys, now all I want you to do is just go out and practice. So practice all those techniques I talked about earlier. finding the friction zone, riding in first gear, coming to a stop and starting without stalling the bike, turning nice and easy. Some other things you can try to do as you're doing it is standing up. This will help with your balance control as well. And you can try that progressive braking trick as well to learn progressive braking. Now these sort of steps will give you the very basics that you need to know in order to get better at riding your bike. And when you're ready to learn a few more advanced tricks as you're progressing, come back to the channel and check out this playlist to learn some more tricks. I'll have videos in the future on practice drills, how to navigate certain difficult terrain, that sort of thing. But if you have any ideas or any questions or anything you want to know how to do, feel free to drop that in the comments below, and I will definitely answer your question or try to make a video on it in the future. So with all that being said, get out there, have fun on your bike. I hope you got a benefit out of this video. If you did, please leave a like, subscribe to the channel to see more in the future. That has been Soup Moto's beginner guide on how to ride a dirt bike. Soup out.